Hi everybody! In this video I'm going to show different ways of how to encase beads. And I believe I have 5 different ways to show you. My website is up and running finally at jeanniecoxglass.com, or you can always reach me through Facebook. So the first video, I have this sped up just a little bit, and then I'm going to slow down when I actually start encasing. But I just have a simple yellow bead. It's just for the tutorial, so I'm not making anything special. I'm just getting a yellow bead just shaped out, slightly barrel shaped, which I'm making it into a little barrel now, just so I can have nice ends and stuff, and finalizing the shaping here. And then when I start to actually encase, I'm going to slow down. This first encasement I'm showing you is just the coiling technique where you wrap around the bead. And it's really kind of hard to see on this angle, but I actually hold the glass out like in a wide V, like my mandrel's one side of the V and my hand is the other side of the V. And so they're on an angle from each other to force the glass into any crevices to eliminate beads, if that makes sense. And so I start with a simple coil around the mandrel side, and I'm heating this, and I have it slowed down a little bit. I'm heating and I'm twisting that clear rod to get it nice and molten, and I'm pushing it in on an angle so there's more glass being pushed towards my holding hand. And the other side of the bead, it's like there's less glass there, so it's kind of like being put down on an angle, pushing against the previous coil. And you're also overlapping those coils like a quarter or a third of the way. As you wrap around, you're overlapping. So it's on an angle and it's overlapping. And I hope that explains. And you want to keep those air bubbles out, and so that's why you go on that angle. So you're not straight up and down with that clear rod. You're on an angle sticking out. If you're right-handed, you would be sticking out to the right. If you're left-handed, you're sticking out to the left. And so here, so I have all my coils on, and all I'm doing is heating just that clear part, and then I'm just pushing it down towards the mandrel without touching the mandrel. You don't want it actually touching, because that's how you could create little sharp ends. You just want to push it as close as you can. Some people actually just use heat and maybe Marver, which I show in another video. But I feel it's more consistent with me to push it down. So it's all up to you if you want to push that clear down to the mandrel or not, or just use heat and gravity to move the clear. And so I'm just rounding out the bead here, and then that bead is done, and there's no bubbles in it. It's really hard to see because it's glowing, but there are no bubbles. I'm trying to get it in the picture. I can't do it. So it's a nicely encased bead. So the next one I'm going to show you is and I might have showed this in another video, I'm not sure, but this I call the tall wrap, which it's a great way to actually take a twisty or a stringer and actually have it spread out into lines like across a bead. And so what you start with is a really tall disc. So you try to get it even, you try to have it nice and evenly thick. And I'm just wrapping a twisty on the end there. And I'm actually twisting it a little more as I put it on, as you could see. And then I just get that, I'm trying to even it out here. And you want to make sure that it goes all the way around. And I'm just trying to even it out because it was more towards one side than the other. And so I want to get that all on the surface, and I want to sort of start melting it in. It doesn't have to be totally melted, but I just want to get it all smooth. And so this is still a nice tall disc. As you can see, it's not really gotten any fatter. And so, but it has a twisty on the top. And so now what I'm going to do is I am going to add several wraps of clear on the top. And of course this is sped up. If you can't tell, this is sped up. But it should be hopefully simple enough that you can deal with it. And you can see I'm still twisting. If you look at my hand, I'm still twisting my clear. And that's just how I put it on. Some people totally rotate their rods so that they stay, you know, there's more glass being heated, so it goes on smoother and faster. But it's whatever way you like to do it. And so I'm putting on several layers here. I think it might be 3 layers of clear wrapping around. And now I'm just adding a little bit where I think it's thinner than the rest. So I look at the side of it and see if one side looks thinner than the other. And now I'm just heating this clear. So I have it like on the top of the flame or below the flame, and I'm just trying to heat the clear. I'm not trying to heat the color underneath, at least not yet. And so now I'm underneath the flame again, so I go back and forth, but it's whatever you feel comfortable with. And so that clear is now thickening up, and it's covering that striped cane, and it's starting to spread it out. So now the whole bead is starting to be heated, even though I'm focusing mostly on the clear, but the residual heat is heating the rest of the bead, and it's starting to spread out, and it's making those stripes in the twisty spread out also. It's pulling all the twisty glass with it. And this time I am just heating the clear on one side or the other to pull it down towards the mandrel. Because wherever you heat, that's the direction the glass will move. If I heat it on the left side, the glass will have a tendency to move to the left side. And if I heat it on the right side, the glass will move to the right side. And so I'm using that and gravity to actually encase that close to the mandrel. And so look at that. So you have all these little stripes on that bead and no bubbles. So that's that kind of encasement. That's always a fun one to make. So the next one I'm going to make is this is just a base of red, a base color of red, and I put some of that red, white, and blue twisty on here too, just for some kind of decoration. So whatever kind of decoration you have, it doesn't matter. And this is just a barrel shape. And I am just going to show how I do swipe encasing. So it's kind of like coiling, but I do smaller sections at a time. And this is if you are really having a hard time with the coiling and you still get bubbles. And with the coiling, it's really important that the glass has got to be hot enough. And so with the swipe encasing, this is usually it works because the glass is hot enough when you put it down. So I start with that little edge like usual, and see, I take my glass, I heat it up really well, and then I push and swipe. I push down. I'm pushing a little forcefully, not too much, but I push down and then swipe, and I'm pushing any air out. I'm making sure it's sealed against the previous layer, and there's no bubbles in it. And you could see it's skinnier on one side than the other. There's a fatter lump on the other side. So I am doing it a little bit on an angle too, just like the coiling. So now I have it sped up. But as you can see, I go around, I superheat that clear, of course not boiling, but it's really hot, and I push against the previous layer, partially overlapping it, and I'm pushing against it and swiping to get any air out. So it doesn't allow any air bubbles in. And then my end is just one little wrap around the other end. So I make sure I have enough glass on both ends. And this is sped up, of course. And I'm just going to do the same thing where I push down that clear close to the mandrel, but not touching, but as close as you can get it. And then heat will kind of do the rest and pull it closer to the mandrel. if you heat it well there. And then I'm going to do the other side, and you chill your tool. I don't know if you saw that. I dipped my tool in my water back there to cool it. You don't want it to get too hot. If your tool gets too hot, the glass will stick to it. So you want to keep it cool. So every once in a while, dip it in your cold water. And so now all I have to do is heat this through and then reshape. And then this bead is encased. So it just takes a little bit of practice. I think the most important thing is that your clear needs to be hot enough when you lay it down, whichever way you use to encase. It needs to be hot enough to eliminate those air bubbles. So I think it just takes maybe a little more practice. And if your bead is just warm, but your clear is hot, that works out well. So here's this one, sort of a close-up of it. There's that one nicely encased. I don't think there's any air bubbles in that one. So that worked out well. I'm just giving it a little more heat, trying to strike that red a little bit too, to make sure that it's nicely struck. And there's that bead. Now the next one I'm going to do, this is sped up too. I'm going to do just like the swiping on the previous bead. Sorry, I'm just shaping this guy up. But just like the swiping on the previous bead, I'm going to swipe, but I'm going to do it horizontally along the mandrel length of the bead. So it's still like swiping. This is a good way if you want a thinner encasing to your bead. The swipe is a good method. Even if I'm doing the coiling swipe, it's a good method to make it a thinner encasing. And so here I'm just adding just some striking color silver glass, just in little ribbons going back and forth. I'm just adding a little bit at a time around the bead, but not totally covering it, because I do want to show the black or the blue background there. And so of course this is sped up too. Even so, it's a long video. And so now I'm going to use my white that I'm going to encase with. I'm just trying to swirl this around. So I'm just pulling the glass and swirling it, wiggling it around, just kind of making an organic type of design in it. It's however you want to make your bead. I really didn't have to even show this because it's about encasing, not about making designs, but so I'm just going to melt this up and then get the shape I want. First I'm making it a barrel, and then I'll taper down the barrel to a little bit rounded edges. Make sure my ends are nice. It's always better to make sure your ends are nice before you encase. Sometimes it's not necessary if you're doing a thick encasement. But if you're just doing a thin encasement, you want to already make sure your holes are established and nicely dimpled. So I'm just shaping this out, trying to round it out. It's a little bit crooked. And then I'm going to encase this. Here I'm trying to do a fast cool down with my brass. Some silver glasses actually work better if you cool them down quickly and with a chilled tool. Okay, so here I'm going to encase. So I want to heat up a nice little ball of glass on this, clear, and then I push down with the rod. So you're using the actual rod to push the glass down. And I am overlapping these just a little bit, just barely. It's really close, but you make sure you overlap it totally so that none of the underlying color is showing through. You want to make sure it's really attached to each other, all this clear. And so I'm just swiping down, heating the glass, using the rod to swipe it down and push it against the other glass to try to keep any air bubbles out. And there was the last one, I believe. And so now I got these little ends on the bottom, so I'm just going to push those down, and it's going to get close to the mandrel there. So you cover the mandrel. So I'm just melting those little divots in that were sticking out, and heat them up and push it down close to the mandrel. Get it all nicely encased. And then the other side, I'm going to do the same thing. It was a little thicker on this side, so it was easier to get it down to the mandrel. And plus I started closer to the mandrel than the bottom. And now I just heat this up too. So I'm just heating it down and reshaping. Making sure my ends are straight there. And sorry, I go off screen a little bit here. And just straightening up the ends and trying to even out this little, it's kind of like a fat barrel shape. And I could have flattened this if I wanted and made it more of a medallion like. But I think I just left this one round. So just some final shaping here, and then hopefully I'll have a close-up. Okay, the next one I'm doing is dot encasing. And so you see I have all those marini just sticking in a piece in a bead of glass. And first I'm going to go through and I'm going to dot the tops of all those marini just to cover them, make sure they're all covered. And so I'm going to do that. And this is if you have any kind of raised decoration on your beads, like marini. It doesn't have to be this raised. And so I want to melt that clear really hot and push it down in between any little gaps I can find in the marini, along the sides, anywhere you find it. And you want to have that really molten. You want that clear really molten so it flows in and tries to eliminate any bubbles. And I think I did get like one bubble in this encasement here that was, you know, close to the bottom, or close to the bottom of the marini, close to the blue base color. But basically, so this is dot encasing. You can use this if you have any kind of raised decoration on the surface that you want it to stay raised. You would dot around the raised section, and then you could swipe encase any other section of the bead that doesn't have raised areas. But this is just another way to do it. If you have something you want to actually stick out in your finished bead and actually have like a 3D effect on your bead, dot encasing is pretty good. So I redotted all those marini, and I'm trying to mush them down to kind of widen them out a little bit. I don't think it really worked too well because I think the rest of my clear was maybe a little too high up, my dot encasing, for these guys to spread out so much, because the bead stayed kind of taller than I thought it would be. But they still stuck up in the bead, and that was the whole point of dot encasing, was to have these marini sticking up. Even though it's not the greatest looking bead, you could see the marini sticking up inside the clear. And that's the whole point of this type of encasing, is so that you can actually have kind of a 3D effect and show some depth inside your bead. with different designs, whatever design you have in there. I just use Marini as an example, but it can actually be, you can have a bead with you know, a figure or something on it, or a tree or something on it, and you could dot around the tree, and the tree would look like it's raised off of the base of the bead. If you dot encase around it and then cover the rest of the bead with clear, it would look like the tree is a little bit raised there. And so that's this technique. And I'm just melting this down. Of course, it's sped up too. And I'm just doing a final shaping, and then I'll slow down so you can see it better, even though it's on my beginning and end picture. All the beads that I have on this video are in that photo. And so here we go. I'll show you the close-up. And there it is. Sorta, kinda. It's still glowing, but I'm trying to get it so you could see it. But I do have one bubble in there. I was trying to point at it. It's hard to see. But you could see those Marini are raised up in there, and that's the whole point of the dot encasing. So there is that. And the last one I'm going to show you is referred to, I think, as the dump, which is, it's kind of a fun way to do it. You just have to get used to how much glass you think you'll need for what particular bead you are covering. And this works best for round beads, like to do one dump and cover a bead with one dump of glass. That's the whole point of this, and it's a really good way to eliminate any kind of air bubbles. But what you do is, I'm just keeping my bead warm in the back there, and I'm heating up a big ball of clear here, what I think I'm going to need to cover that whole bead all the way around. And I think I had a little too much glass, but still, too much is better than too little, because you don't want to be short. And so once it's ready, I take my bead out of the flame and I really heat the bottom part of that glass. I let it droop, and then I just push it and roll my bead around. I push it a little bit on there, and then I basically roll my bead to collect the rest of the clear glass on top. And it's a really neat way to do it. And so now I'm just smoothing out that clear, trying to get it even. And I am going to use heat this time, just heat and marvering, to actually pull the clear down towards the mandrel instead of using a tool. So this is the way some people get their glass, the clear glass, all the way to the ends. They use heat. See, I'm heating and holding it on an upward angle, and then on the other side holding it on a downward angle, and I'm heating right at the edges, and that pulls the clear to the edges. And once I feel it's pulled enough towards the edges, I just reshape my final bead shape, get it all nice and rounded, try to get it even. And I'll do one final heating, I think, here. And that is the dump encasement. That's a fun one to do. And so I'll try to get a little close up here. It's still glowing a bit, but it's still that same twisted stringer on a bead, and no bubbles there. So that's all I have for encasing for now. I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully it helps some of you guys out. Thanks so much for watching.